Welcome to another Funky Friday at 5. This is the 15th edition, so it's the Funky Friday at 5 on the 15th. And I'm your host, Mitch Hampton. I'm going to adjust camera a little bit here. So what is there to say? It's Good Friday. It's also, from what I understand, Passover. And it's Earth Day's coming up. There are taxes on the 18th, from what I understand. And so I say shalom on this Friday. And since I'm seated at the piano, I thought I would do something a little unexpected because that's our theme song. But I use that theme song in what I'm currently composing, which is the last movement in my piano quintet. And I got it somewhere here. Yeah, here it is. This is my chicken scratch. It's called Get Down. And this is, of course, is a is a string quartet, right, with piano. But I use the same, look what I do here. I use the same thing. So I have it does that, yeah, it does that for some time, which is, my nod to minimalism a little bit. But this is a principle I talked about last year. I did a couple of audio shows about music or composition. And the most important thing, at least in my music, is dramatic contrast. Because the world changes, we change, personalities conflict, characters conflict in life, and you're not always happy, you're not always sad, etc., and so on. So we have this thing here. That's some contrast, and that's the actually first time in the piece that departs from this departs from that. And I even have I've spent too much time on that. That's too. I hope I'm not boring you all with that. But let's get down to the talk portion of the show. I'm going to move my sitting in my chair here and trying to figure out how I'm going to approach today's topic, because it's an unusual topic, I think. There was a vogue, there is maybe still in memoir writing, creative nonfiction, of taking objects in people's lives and showing the emotional, psychological, historical significance of that object as it applies to the human being, right? The individual life. And so For example, I guess not me, but I guess somebody like an author who is female will write about if she likes black dresses, she'll write about all the black dresses she's owned or something, or she might write about a communion dress, and there's a whole I think it's a genre, maybe it's a very I was like, so basically I think 20 years ago I was reading this stuff when it was coming out, not all of it because I don't love all of it, but I would often go to these literary salons, and because I was living in Boston, I would get into all these very, you used to say highfalutin, very Tony, highbrow sort of programs. On the dais would be Harold Bloom or somebody, or Wendy Lesser, and just really interesting people. But they would always discuss the state of fiction, the state of writing, where is writing, and they were. It was notable that there were these books being written like this. So I don't know if that has anything to do with today's show, but I'm going to talk about my briefcases, because I've been carrying a briefcase, I think, every day of my life if I leave the house or the apartment since, I would say, 1982. It's now 2022, right? So look at this. That's me. And look at that political. Now that I don't want you to get, this is in New York, I don't want you to get distracted by the political graffiti. Although this is, I was actually going to a piano audition, and this would have been 1982. I would have been 12, 13. Look at my haircut. I've got that Nicholas Bradford A's Enough haircut held over from the late 70s, but look, I have a briefcase. And it's I don't want to speculate on who did that graffiti. I mean, I'm guessing the time period, it would have been one of those PLP or RCP, one of those very extreme Marxist-Leninist sects that were popular, that are popular now. But I like that graffiti, actually, and I sort of took my picture in front of that. That was in Manhattan. I have so much to share. This won't be the last live stream, hopefully, so I won't have to squeeze it all into this show. But you saw the picture of me in the snowstorm. So if you look on the Facebook, on the picture, that was in front of my house in 1995, and a tree, it was like 3 feet of snow, and a tree broke off and impaled this man's vehicle. And I'm standing there with a briefcase with my picture next to it. And that's the winters, what they would be like in Boston, how they could get. And I sort of this is the same era of the 90s. There it is again. There's a briefcase. I don't think this is the same one from 82. It's unlikely, but I would invest in a good briefcase, just like I always invested. And this is a time when I did have some money. This is a long time ago, some time ago, and I would invest in very good quality things, just like my clothes, my wardrobe. I would invest in a coat and a shirt and thing. But I also thought I wanted one because I was using the briefcase every day. And so I figured, why do I want to have a bad briefcase? I can use it every day. It's got to be a good one. But for the very first time in my life, when I moved to the Asheville area in North Carolina, I actually got a bespoke briefcase. And that's what I've got right here. And I chose these two leathers. Isn't that beautiful? And so I'm gonna do a shameless other promotion. This is Paul Taylor, not the dance company. And although that's a whole other, Paul Taylor Dance Company is amazing, Esplanade. But no, this is Paul Taylor Sandal Makers and Leather in Asheville. Yes, Paul Taylor. And it's a guy named Ivar made this. And then there's another dude that works with him who's has a rock and roll look. He has all these elaborate tattoos, and he wears really skinny tight jeans, and they do beautiful work. And they made this. And I had a disagreement with them. They're against zippers. It's some strange, to me, strange ideological rule belief that you must have a buckle and not a zipper. I don't know. It's something they're into. And they didn't want to bend. I'm like, well, can you, I want to have a zipper. But they put it in the zipper, because I was paying for it, and but it's a beautiful zipper. It's funny. They never do it. They'll make a special exception if someone's a pain in the ass like myself or is paying good money for it. But, they put this zipper in here, and this zipper is the best zipper I've ever had in anything I've ever owned. Not that I've owned that much really, but in trousers even. And so I'm thinking, they don't believe in it, but they did it, and they did the best zipper. So go figure. So why briefcases? Why? Why in the 80s, 90s, 2000s, in my teens, in my 20s? Why? Well, here's the thing. I kind of want to be prepared for a sort of cataclysmic event or an accident. And to me, the worst thing, one of the worst things about the state of affairs, there's more than one bad thing we could say about that, should it happen. Heaven forbid, is stuck with nothing to do and nothing to read. Gotta have my book. So that's really what it is. And so basically in these briefcases, let's say a car breaks down. Let's say I'm in a taxi. Let's say the subway breaks down. I'll have my briefcase and I'll have, and look what I got in here. Let's open it up. I've got this, I'm studying Hannah Arendt now in preparation for, should she accept Samantha Rose Hill come on the show. And I'm trying to basically read everything Hannah Arendt wrote. And so I'm reading her last work called Life of the Mind, which is in 3 parts. The third was not written. It's thinking, willing, and judging is the part she didn't get to because she died. But I'm in the thinking part, so I've got that. But look, I've got all these books. I've got this, which I'm going to be talking about on this show. I think it's on the 29th. My producer Lori will know when it is. I'm going to do a book lunch and discuss this wonderful book. I've got, I'm really into Carl Jaspers. He's totally neglected. Nobody talks about Jaspers. They talk about everybody else. They'll talk about, Derrida, and they'll talk about Max Weber. They don't talk about Jaspers. It's a beautiful, just beautiful. And the major reason I'm reading is that he was such an influence on Hannah Arendt, actually, and they had correspondence and there's letters. So it's just a lot of books, I mean, as our Nafisi, Read Dangerously. This book, so, if you're stuck somewhere, you could pull out a book, let's say people were bored and you could pull out what's here. I don't know, read from it, right? You could say, well, she's talking about, as our Nafisi, who's been on our show, I want to have her back, is talking about reading Toni Morrison's The Bluest Eye. Now, she chose that novel. She could have chosen Son of Solomon, which is the one I read around that time. But she's talking about, I remember so well when I first read The Bluest Eye. It was during one of my trips in the 90s to the United States. You remember that between the winter of 1989 and 90 and 97, when I migrated to the US for good? She's writing to her father, like a memory of her moving from Iran to the US. I would travel there for speaking engagements and conferences. I don't need to remind you that not long after I returned to Iran in 79, my passport was taken. Ironically, because of my anti-government activities during the Shah's time. And I could not leave the country for another 11 years. This was an emotional time for me, during which I began to believe that I would never be able to leave Iran, never mind return to America. You must remember, Father, how I kept bugging you about my predicament and how you prescribed patience, reminding me in vain that things never stay the same. I'm not going to get to the Morrison. I mean, I could. I mean, that's a whole, so if I pull this book out during an accident, or like if something's closed. Oh, here's a good reason. Another good reason for having a briefcase is if a movie's late starting. If you're going to the movies and the projection's broken or something, or I don't know, things happen. You got something to read, it's so important. So it's mainly for books. And also, like, I don't know what else I got in here. I got this because I'm always trying to write letters to people that I care about that are important to me. And that's a very serious endeavor. Like my letters, I'm pretty serious about my letters. I don't just dash off a note and send it to somebody. I don't just dash off a note and send it to somebody. I like write a letter, and they're slow and so I gotta have a place for my letters. Back when I had more of a personal life than I have now. There's other things in here, but then I've got things like, see, this is the thing. This is the thing about living here in Weaverville is like, it was 39 degrees this morning. I think. Was it? Or was it yesterday? And then it goes up to 69 at noon. And then the evening it's 40. So, I don't know, you just sort of got to pack a scarf. I don't want to bore anybody, but then, but basically that's the briefcase. And so it's sort of like, if I led a different life, or if I lived a life in which I had a car, like a Volkswagen Bug, or a station wagon, or a Hyundai, or a Porsche, or a Maserati, or a Austin Healey, and there's these alternate Mitches that have these other lives. It's not my life, or a Ferrari, or a BMW, these kind of pickup truck. I probably would have this stuff in the vehicle, right? Isn't that what people do? Or if I lived the life of a I'm trying to find the right words. I'm male, but if I live what is a more, I don't know the words, a common sort of lifestyle of say a woman, I'd have a purse, right? So it's kind of like that. But these briefcases that I've had cause a lot of hostility in other people. They often don't like it that I have it. They get very because people often project things onto things. They project things onto, well, we all do. We there's the things in the world, and then when we receive the things that are in the world, like a movie, like a book, like a picture, like music, and we don't receive it purely. We don't receive it directly. We receive it for what we think it is, and we bring all this stuff to it. And so, I don't know, briefcases, but it's just fun, life is short, and you gotta. Why are they on my case? Oh, see, our producer Laurie is actually an expert. This is something I am not like this. What I'm going to say, she's a real word person, more than I am. She can develop. She's one of these people that can develop puns, and can start spinning wordplay, almost like she's Tom Stoppard or something, And I don't know if it's her training, or I think it's partly she was born that way, but I think it's also partly maybe her classical education. She's got a real facility, and so she's very quick. And so she could go, if you ever stuck in a room with Floyd Strickland, and she starts going into that mode of words and puns, she could be a joke writer. I don't know why she could be hired as a joke writer for a talk show, or for a comedy show or something. I don't know. So that's. I hope you don't mind me speaking of you that way, because she's our producer, and you may not know that about her. So I brought a lot of things, but I'm not going to know if I can get to all of them. But this is I developed this hard listening style of music, and you can get these piano albums of mine on Bandcamp and CD Baby. This is part 2, and I had a and I think I actually talked to Hannah, who did this photograph, about having a briefcase in the. I was almost going to have, like a case or a kind of a thing here, but I think we advised against it. But that's kind of funny. What does all this stuff mean? Well, I've had all these travels and I've had all these experiences traveling, and I'm always taking my briefcase. And my briefcase has been in snowstorms and it's been in. This is me in Prague, recording my piano concerto with the Prague Radio Orchestra. And this was right after the fall of the Berlin Wall. Is that kind of golden period, or that sort of very exciting, alive with possibilities period between 1992 and 95. And this was, I think, 95, 96. And this is on the bridge. This is a very famous bridge in Prague. And so, it's funny. I look at these photographs and I look at here's a photograph from high school. This is me and Clara Ponte, who's become a superstar. She's become a superstar pianist and sort of a pop singer, folk singer. She writes her own material. She's the daughter of Jean-Luc Ponty, the violinist. And this is in a cafeteria. So I've been going through all these these pictures and these kind of this is me at a white piano. I used to have a white piano in the 90s, and this is the same apartment where we had that 3-foot snowstorm where the guy's car got impaled. And I got some publicity shots because I was doing these strange gigs. Like, I was just sort of desperate for work at that time. Not desperate, but I mean, somebody says you want to do this, and somebody I knew do these tunes, and and they had a gig and you get paid. It was just it's interesting to think about that time because I have photos of that time. Like there was a society of musicians, and it was what you would call sort of commercial music, but it was kind of general business. They called it GB music, and it was very big for 20 years. And you would get a call from someone and you'd go out and the thing about it is that, and I have real rich memories of this. I mean, I have all kinds of stories. I won't, at some point I'll get into, but one, the thing about it is that the material that we did, and the material was the material, like the material was popular songs, or like you're playing a bar mitzvah or a bat mitzvah or a wedding or something. But then there's the musicians, and the musicians were often so good, and it was such a joy to play with musicians that good, that it's interesting. It's almost like the material didn't matter. I mean, the material matters, of course. You want to play the song correctly. Here's a picture of me. Look at that. We had matching. We're playing matching tie. You had to wear these awful ties. That I'm playing this keyboard. I mean, I've got tons of stuff, but always the briefcase. But what I was saying about these musicians is that I felt that the musicians were really good, and so we've been playing this material, and I guess what I'm trying to express, and it's hard because it's a very philosophic thing, is that it becomes transformed because we're playing it, and it's live music. So even though it's in a context, it's in a context that's slightly compromised, by which I mean it's business and it's commercial, and it's kind of it's got things about it that are compromised. In other words, not ideal. In other words, it isn't like I just played something that I wrote this week. I'm writing this concert piece. It isn't that. It isn't wholly original, and it isn't something that I'm creating. And it was, there's a business work aspect to it. But because the musicians are good, and because things about the moment and the aliveness it actually makes it special, if that makes any sense at all. And I don't really know. I don't really, it's actually I don't really know how to talk about it, but I think it's kind of um, it's kind of a like some would call it spiritual, but it's kind of a transformative thing. And I actually, the reason why I'm talking about is that my hard listening idea came from those experiences. So it came from me wondering, if I could express something about the meaning of that in a way that's transformed, because I like to put things together that don't necessarily fit together, and don't really. I can see that Amazon in their idiocy or their wisdom have targeted my album as being explicit lyrics because the word "hard" is in it. And I was actually advised because I wanted to do. I was advised by a producer. I wanted to, because the concept of music is like based on easy listening music, right? And sort of the idea of music that's for a function, or like music or background music, that I would use elements of that very language but transform it. I thought, well, why don't we call it hard listening music? But a lot of people said no, And so look, Amazon is reminding me that even though there's no lyrics, I'm not saying I'm not, I don't have a I'm not saying about getting busy or anything. It's just music. But it's funny, just we live in a world where things just kind of, you know. I guess I could talk to Amazon and say, why is that in there when there's no words? Or maybe, I don't know. I mean, we live, you live in the world that you're in. We're all in the world, and then, I laugh about it a lot, like it makes me laugh because I think it's funny. I don't know why, but I mean, I can see not everybody would be amused by it, but it's just these things are funny to me. But so those are my briefcases over the years, and this latest one is, I kind of, think, I don't know. I think the world's changed a lot, of course. Well, we know that it has, and I think when things constantly change, it's a good idea to have something constant. Kind of like a constant, like practicing the piano every day, right? Or a constant, like some people love to talk about hygiene. That's another thing too, is that people talk about hygiene in public now. They didn't used to, and it's a change. People like to, but there's rituals that you do every day. Like taking a bath, right? Taking a shower, and and this briefcase is sort of like that. And so it's a good thing to have. And I think, and you may be stuck, and there may be a traffic jam. I pity the poor person with me, because I may pull out one of these books and start reading about. I mean, God knows what I might have. So there's a picture of me when I was a child doing my magic show. It looks like I had to polish my nails. It looks like it's weird. It's like I'm in a tree there. This would have been in Tampa, Florida. But look, I had that same haircut. Like, it took me forever to get rid of that haircut. I had the same haircut 10 years later. I guess it's easy, this bowl cut. But I doing these little magic shows because I was forced. Well, not forced. My dad was like a stage father kind of, and because he loved magic, and he said, well, why don't you learn to do these magic tricks and get on a TV show and entertain the kids and and I guess the hardest thing about being a child magician was memorizing the moves, because I had to pull a rabbit out of a hat, and I had to and this is before I ever touched an instrument. Like, this is before my musical studies. I was going home after these magic shows. I was listening to music and really getting deep into Copeland and Miles Davis, and Weather Report, and listening to all this music. So I was absorbing it. And I think one of the reasons why I listened to so much music is I didn't have access to an instrument. And I used to fantasize about what it would be like to play a keyboard, because I didn't have one. So it's interesting. It's interesting to think about me doing these little plays and these magic shows. And after the magic show is over, you kind of you listen to an album and thinking, well, one day maybe I'll have an upright piano, which I did eventually have a little upright piano and play these little exercises, that the teacher, Violetta Mendizi, these exercises, and you learn. Then it's funny. You end up here in this town, in this home, and I'm doing these streaming shows. So it's really remarkable. I sort of feel like I've had I feel like I've lived many lifetimes somehow, and I've had many experiences. It really feels that way to me, even though I know in some ways my life has been very uneventful. I've never married or had kids, which is extraordinary. I mean, you're almost a pariah in our society if you don't do either one of those things, it seems. But I have my reasons, and then I mean, there's a lot of things I haven't done. I don't change a tire, I don't drive. That's a big thing. There's a lot of things in life. But even though these things in life, which of course are very important for people, and I get that, I haven't done them, but it feels like I've done the equivalent in terms of richness of experience and in terms of I don't know, that I feel like I've seen a lot of things, and I try to talk about them on here, and I try to talk about them in my blog posts. So, for example, in my blog post, if I'm writing about something that seems to have nothing to do with anything personal, there's a little bit of personal thing in it. I try to bring something in, like when I saw Valley Girl, when I did a show with Laurie about Valley Girl, I was on a date when I saw that show at a mall in Tampa, and the girl that I was with, who I was really crazy about, hated this movie, which is weird because the movie was targeted. It was made for a female audience. Strange. You can never predict what someone's going to like or not like. And I remember she had hair like Cyndi Lauper, and it was in the early 80s. And so it's funny. I might talk about that experience of being on the date, as much as I talk about the movie Valley Girl or Nick Cage or something, And so to me, it all is the same. It's all a snapshot. It's a snapshot of reality that when we have a snapshot, we have this, the me and the tree, and then the snapshot opens up things, and then out of that we have a piece of music, or we have a book, or we have a novel, or a TV show, because I'm watching some TV shows like been watching Julia and Minx and the girl from Plainville. That's a whole other discussion. And so things emerge from things. And so it's like starting with the photograph or starting with the briefcase, just like those books I was talking about, where people wrote about their black dress or wrote about their, I mean, Megan Dunn wrote a whole book that I failed to mention when she was on my show about real estate, about being a homeowner. I mean, you can write about anything. Basically, as I'm saying, you can make art about literally anything. And so what makes the art valuable or interesting is what you do with the thing, like what the thing opens up. So that it's not really about a briefcase. It's about, people hated Mitch's briefcase. Pain in the ass guy, always has that goddamn briefcase. Why does he have that briefcase, kind of thing, But, I might pull something out of that briefcase that somebody might really love. So, again, you may dislike the briefcase, but there might be something in it that might, be of use to you or not. I don't know. So that's it for this show on the 15th. And I hope you, whatever your beliefs or practices, and to quote a former president, even if you are a free thinker or a non-believer, that you have something to do or some way to observe one of these many sort of important days coming up in the upcoming week. And I'm doing a concert here in a week. Yes, thank you. I'm doing I think that's on the 24th on a Sunday with a trio right here. And, there's a guy who has a show called Culturally Determined. His name is R.A. Cohen Wade, and his show has been on for many years now. And he's a guest, he's an upcoming guest on our episode, and he talks about, what it's like to host a show when he never ever wanted to host a show. He was a scholar. He was a research man in the back in the studio, and somehow he finds himself hosting his own show. I think that's interesting. I think it's interesting. I hope you listen in, because it's interesting, because he's an introvert. He's really introverted, but he's actually really good. Well, like a lot of introverts, he's good at doing things involving other people. Interestingly enough, right? So because he doesn't, I think because he doesn't lunge at people. He doesn't. He draws people out. I try to do that on my shows, but that's coming up, and there's so much going on. There's an episode now with a wonderful painter, Alexandra Carter. There's a lot to listen to. You don't have to listen to it when it drops. That's the thing about the internet, and about one of the positive things about the world we're in now is you can listen to it 4 a.m. It's not time sensitive. And even sometimes the topics we discuss aren't time sensitive. I guarantee you, even if we do a topical show, if we talk about a TV show that came out, that dropped this week, that, maybe a few years from now, that TV show, and that people might still be talking about it, for some different reason, probably not for the reason that was the intent of the creators, which is often the case, right? Where, so thank you for tuning in, and I hope to do, I promised my producer I'm going to do more spontaneous pop-up streams. So thank you.